Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this program under the topic Beyond Boundaries. We should have over 50 people joining us from industry, representing diverse industry sectors. And in addition, we do have our own students from SID Business School, more than 50. They are joining from a classroom. And we do have students, postgraduate students from University of Sri Jawadanapura as well. I welcome everyone on board to listen to a very productive and insightful session to be delivered by an eminent scholar. He is Professor John Bessant. Thank you very much, Professor, for accepting our invitation. Despite your holiday from UK to Cyprus, you were kind enough to accept our invitation. Let me quickly give a brief introduction to Professor John Bessant. He is a globally recognized author in the subject of innovation, incremental and radical innovations, plus managing innovations. He was the professor of entrepreneurship and innovation management attached to Exeter University of UK. His background is he's a chemical engineer by profession, and he has a first degree in psychology as well, and his PhD is into innovation studies. Very interestingly, Professor John Bessant, showing his authority in the subject of innovation and his dominant thinking in this field, he has published over 45 books on innovation. Some of his books are used by us in Sri Lankan universities. Professor John Bessant, he has an H index of over 77 and large number of citations. Thank you very much, Professor John Bessant, for accepting our invitation. Over to you, Professor.
Oh, thank you so much, Dr. Shanta, and good evening, everyone. It's a really great pleasure to be able to join you and to talk a little bit about this pet subject of mine, innovation. Can I just perhaps begin by trying to share my screen? Hopefully we can fix that.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just... can you all see that? Is that visible?
Yes, Professor, we can see your slide deck.
Perfect, that's all I need. There's not many slides, but they'll just help to keep some focus. So, as I say, it's great to be here, and I'm delighted to be able to talk a little about innovation, but I think we need to recognize that we have a problem with that word, because it's everywhere. I'll give you 30 seconds on any company website. You're going to hit that magic word. You know the kind of thing. Innovation driving the business. Innovation working for the customer. Everywhere we look, it's all about innovation. And these days in the public sector, it's the same story. How are we going to deal with the huge challenges of delivering public services? Let's try some innovation. So just as much on the lips of civil servants is this magic word. Innovation, innovation everywhere. That's the problem. Because everybody's talking about it, the word is all around us. The trouble is that just saying, we believe in innovation, is a slogan. On its own, that gets us nowhere. If we're serious about innovation, then we've got to learn to do something about it. We've got to manage innovation. And that's very much where I'm coming from. I've spent my life trying to understand how we might organize and manage innovation. It's not a random process. It is something very human. It is something we can learn to do better. So focus very much on managing innovation, not just having that slogan, oh yes, we believe in innovation. So perhaps the first thing we could usefully have to start with is a simple definition. What is innovation? Well, for me, it's very simple. It's creating value from ideas. Now, that value could be commercial value. We're used to that idea of innovation, but it can also be social value. And very much that world as well is one which requires innovation. I do a lot of work these days in the humanitarian sector, where we have the awful man-made disasters as well as natural ones, and we have to do something. We have to save lives, give people food, medicine, shelter. All of this depends very much on innovation. So there's an example where we're not talking about making a lot of money. We are talking about using ideas to create value, in this case, social value. I'm not the only one suggesting that. If we take the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, pretty important 17 things we have to do to save our planet. How are we going to deal with those incredibly challenging targets? Well, the Secretary General himself of the United Nations said the answer is innovation. But I come back to how I introduced this. It's not enough just to say, yes, we need innovation. We have to learn to do something with it. We have to learn to manage it. So let me focus on that and suggest that we have some good news. Because first of all, we know how to do it. We know how to manage innovation. In a sense, we ought to, because we've got about 100 years of research on the subject. How can we organize and make innovation happen? But it's not just research carried out by people like myself on the academic side, it's also experience. We have a huge body of knowledge which is based on rich experience. Experience of what works and also experience of what doesn't work. But that body of knowledge, those patterns which keep repeating time and again, we can begin to see that there is a body of knowledge, a set of guidelines, which if we stay with them, can help us manage innovation. Anybody might get lucky once, but to be able to keep a steady stream of ideas creating value, whether they're new products and services or new processes, but to have that possibility, that really can build on this rich library of experience. In fact, it's more than just luck. It's very much something that depends on having a systematic approach to doing so. In my work in the humanitarian sector, about 15 years ago, nobody was really using the word innovation, still less thinking about how to manage it. They did a lot of innovation. As I suggested, there's a great deal of innovation that has to take place to solve the crisis problems in a disaster area. But they didn't call it innovation. And more importantly, they moved from one crisis to the next without necessarily capturing learning. Now, I'm pleased to say that for the last 15 years, that picture's been changing. If you look at the sector now, there are many people whose job title is innovation manager. There are many organizations like UNICEF, the children's organization, or the World Food Programme, who have very sophisticated innovation management systems. They're able to invest and create value from ideas. So we know that we can do it, we know what to do, and we know it's not just about being lucky, it's about putting a system in place. And we've now reached the point in 2025 where we even have an international standard for managing innovation. It's ISO 56000 if you want to follow it through, but basically this sets out what any organization, public or private, profit or not for profit, what any organization ought to be doing about organizing and managing innovation. And it also talks about the skills that we need, the kind of people and their abilities to make those systems work. So as I say, we have a great deal of good news in terms of this question of, can we manage innovation? What I'd like to do now is very, very briefly, just to encapsulate 100 years of research into 2 minutes and one picture. What do we know about successful innovation management? Well, the first thing we know is that it's not like the cartoons. It's not that bing, light bulb flashing, and suddenly there it is, innovation coming as if by magic. No. The idea is the light bulb flashing on, but we do know it's a long journey from having the idea to creating value with it. It requires a process. That's what this blue arrow is about, moving from ideas and possibilities to something which really creates value. And we understand some of the stages on this journey and what we can do to help them. At the front end of innovation, it's essentially about searching for possibilities. We know innovation comes from many different directions. It might come from the research lab. It might come from the marketplace. It might come from watching other people and how they do things. It might come from government regulation. It might come from all sorts of directions. What we do know, though, is that any smart organization needs to be aware that there isn't a single trigger for innovation. And so it needs to scan. It needs different antennae picking up different signals, creating a sense of what could we do. But that, of course, sets up a challenge, because out of all these many things we could do, which ones are we going to do and why? Strategic selection. No organization has infinite resources. We can't do everything. So we have to make choices. We have to think about a portfolio of projects, many of them fairly safe bets, a few perhaps more radical, more risky things, which might pay off with a big reward. But we have to somehow move from all the possibilities to strategically selecting. And then we have to make it happen. And the big thing about innovation is it's not just project management. Of course, taking an idea and making something real and valuable from it is going to involve project management. It's about balancing resources against time and budget. But the problem with innovation is uncertainty. We just don't know when we start whether that technology will work, whether that marketplace is really there, whether the competitors have suddenly come up with something that leapfrogs over us. We don't know. Life is uncertain. And so what we need is not just implementation, but we need a way of managing the risk, managing our progress along that journey, and building in the discipline to be able to stop if things really aren't moving in the right direction, or at least to pivot into a more favorable direction. And we have a nice label for this. We talk about agile innovation, but it's really about trying to manage that implementation in a very strategic fashion because we have limited and scarce resources. But we do have a map of the process. We know how to make that happen in different shapes and sizes of organization. We know the kind of good practices which can help us with this. But it's not all. It's not just establishing the process. We've got to recognize a number of other things influence that process. In particular, is there a strategy? Are we simply saying we believe in innovation, or can we articulate how, where, and why innovation is going to take us forward? And can we communicate that right through the organization so that people can use that to guide their particular efforts, aligning their efforts underneath and behind that strategy? And are we making sure as leaders that we're committing not only resources, making it possible for things to happen, but also our commitment and support, our leadership? So there's a great deal around the big question, do we have an innovation strategy? Innovation's about people. The great thing about innovation is it's an extremely human thing. As a species, we wouldn't be around today if it wasn't for our forefathers' ability many, many years ago to solve problems quickly. We're not a very big animal. We're not a strong animal. We're not a fast animal. In the hostile environment of those early days, the only thing that helped us survive and thrive was the 2 kilograms of brain inside our skulls and our ability to imagine, create, to innovate. And really, that still underpins the engine for the organization, the innovative organization of today. It's about people. It's about what they know, the many different kinds of knowledge they have, and it's about their creativity. But above all, it's about making it possible for them to work together, to share and build. That kind of organization doesn't happen by accident. We can all of us think of organization structures which dampen and flatten out innovation. What we want, of course, to create is a supportive place where innovation is the way we do things around here. It's our culture. We've also learned during this 100 years or so the importance of playing with others. This is not a solo act. Innovation is a multiplayer game. And this whole theme, which now has another label, open innovation, is all about making connections, about building ecosystems, partnerships, collaboration, essentially recognizing not all the smart people work for us. If we really want to innovate, we need to make connections. We need to share, we need to give in order to get, we need to work in that networked fashion. And we need to build that in a proactive fashion. And really the last piece of this instant overview of the innovation management standard, the best practice, if you like, it's this green cycle, this idea of learning. No organization starts with a perfect version of this. It's essentially something that we learn over time. We try something out and that seems to work, so we'll reinforce and do some more of that. We might try something else and it doesn't work, so we need the capacity to step back and try something different. So in putting our innovation system together, it's essentially a learning journey, one which reflects and then is prepared to change. It's not a blueprint, it's not one size fits all. Each organization has to learn and develop its particular approaches. And it's interesting if we look at some of the long-established, innovative big names, a company like 3M, for example, the big American product company, 3M have been around well over 100 years, but at their heart, if you read many of the things that are written about them, this process of reflecting, how do we do what we do in the world of innovation, and how might we change and adapt that? So there's a message there around building a learning loop to keep challenging and upgrading our skills in innovation. But as I say, this is all the good news. We know how to manage innovation. However, and this is where I'm going to change the tone slightly in my talk, I'd like to introduce this lady to help me make a rather more challenging point. So please, ladies and gentlemen, meet the Red Queen. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, let me explain briefly. The Red Queen is a character in those wonderful children's books, Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. And she's a great character. She, amongst other things, is capable of believing 3 impossible things before breakfast. So she's quite an interesting person, and Alice has quite an extensive encounter with her. But there is a lesson in Alice's experience we could take. Basically, whatever else you do, if you have the chance to meet the Red Queen, don't play chess with her, for 3 very good reasons. First of all, she keeps changing the rules. You think you're still playing by the official rules of chess, she's making up her own rules. Worse than that, she keeps changing the game. You still think you're playing chess, but she's moved on to something else entirely different. But the really big reason why it's important not to play chess with her, all of this constant change is normal in her world. There's a wonderful scene, if you know the book, wonderful scene where Alice and the Red Queen have been running really, really fast, and they pause for a moment, and Alice is desperately trying to catch her breath, and she says, well, in our country, you generally get somewhere else if you run very fast for a long time, as we've been doing. To which the Red Queen says in that very queenly fashion, that's a slow sort of country. Now here, you see, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that. I think you can see where I'm trying to go with this. I'm not talking about children's stories. I'm suggesting this is a very powerful metaphor for the challenge we have in managing innovation. The problem never changes. How do we create value from ideas? That's a constant challenge. But what does change day to day is the context in which that changes place, which means we've got to adapt our approaches on a continuing basis. Remember also, we're not talking about one change at a time. There are multiple simultaneous sources of change. In a world like that, there is no chance we can get away with being lucky. We have to learn to manage innovation. But particularly, we need what we academics call dynamic capability. That's the ability to step back and say, well, even though we do know how to manage innovation, we need to fine-tune it. We need to reset it. We need to continuously update and revise our approach. Let me perhaps explain that with a simple picture, if I may. 2x2 matrix, we all like them, whether it's academics or consultants. But let me explain this one very briefly. The vertical axis, it's basically innovation, from incremental, doing what we do better, low risk, right the way through to radical, perhaps doing something really different. But we do a lot of that in a world where we assume a frame within which things are fairly predictable, fairly constant. And then we can play the innovation game. We know how to exploit, using ideas to develop and improve incremental innovation, and we can move forward in bigger leaps within bounds. So it's what I would call bounded exploration. But all of that green thing on the right-hand side of the picture you're seeing essentially is new territory. It's new technologies, it's new markets, it's new political rules, it's new economic rules, just like the ones that we've recently had thrown at us by Mr. Trump. It's all sorts within which we have to reframe. And so our nice simple model, the one I just showed you, might work in the established frame, but we're going to need perhaps multiple different models to cope with the challenges as we move to that right-hand side. And that's really the challenge of dynamic capability, being able to constantly assess and reframe, rebuild our approach to innovation. Now, as Dr. Shanta knows, one of the things I've learned to do being a teacher is use a different device to just reinforce my message, not just to say the same thing, but perhaps come at it and reinforce it from the side. So I'm afraid, ladies and gentlemen, I'm now about to sing to you. I'm going to try and explain what I've just talked about in the form of a short song. So please bear with me. If you really feel like singing, you may join in. So just let me get my guitar and we'll have a little song about dynamic capability.
That's very nice of you, Professor.
1 second. Okay, so remember, we're talking about a world of change and we need to change ourselves to cope with it. So here we go. You like to think you're sitting on top of your technology. Your gadgets are smart and cool because you do lots of R&D. Software's fast and your data's the best. Your packaging's great, you can ignore all the rest. There's only one problem left at your door. Folks don't want your product no more. So you need dynamic capability. In innovation, it's got to be dynamic capability at the heart of your philosophy. You can't rely on the old routines to deal with problems you've never seen. In innovation, the key to creation, keep on building up your dynamic capability. Dynamic capability, dynamic capability. So, as I say, that's just saying the same thing, but in a slightly different fashion. So I'll put the guitar away. So, what I'd really like to do now, and thank you for your patience, is stop talking and start listening. In particular, another thing I've learned as a teacher is I can't really second guess what's of interest to my audience. So one of the best things is to find out what you might like to have a little more of my perspective on. So at this point, I'd like to open up. and happily take any questions. If you are interested in songs, I have written a few others, including some recent ones, and there are various other stories, lots of stuff, but that is my website, and I hope the QR code would take you there as well. But Shanta, perhaps Dr. Shanta, can I perhaps pass back to you and
Yeah.
happily take some questions?
Thank you, Professor John Bessant. Ladies and gentlemen, those who joined us a little late, Professor John Bessant has published over 45 books on innovation. He has an H index of 77, unbelievable, and his contribution to the domain of innovation and technology management is amazing. Professor, let me ask a quick question from you. I have two questions, bear with me. Why many business firms are failing at the last phase of innovation management, that is in commercialization?
Well, nice. I'll stop sharing the screen now. A nice, simple question. Thank you. There's not one single reason, obviously, but can I suggest that we've become rather good at the front end of innovation. We understand a great deal, and this whole theme of how you first start up with an idea, the entrepreneurial journey, the lean startup, we know a lot about how to take an idea and knock it into shape, build prototypes and reinforce that, and we know how to bring people on board. We know how to attract business angels and investors and so on, and gradually move to the point where we can launch our product or our service, launch whatever it is, and we get some success. What we've tended to do is to think that's the only problem we've got to solve. And of course it isn't, because that's really only half the innovation journey. The other half is what I call the journey to scale. So as you put it, it may well be you want to scale by commercializing across a large market. Or if we take some of the social innovation I've talked about, it might work very well in one region in Africa. How do we scale this across the whole continent or around the globe to have real social impact? So it's this second journey to scale that we know something about, but we aren't anything like as developed in terms of our recipe book, in terms of our approaches. We've done quite a lot of research on this. We think one of the big questions here is learning how to build networks. That actually, I said earlier on, innovation is a multiplayer game. You can get a long way with a good team at that first journey. But when you want to scale, you're going to need many other players. And not all of them necessarily want to go in the same direction. You might well want partners to help you move your ideas forward, but you have to find ways to give them some value. There are obvious roles like partners, key resource providers, and so on, helping particularly on the marketing side. But there are other players in that network we shouldn't ignore. Let me give you a couple of examples. One is what we call the cartographer. Now, a cartographer is somebody who makes maps, and the cartographer in innovation value networks, in trying to scale things, they're the ones who make the rules of the game. It's very often the government or the regulator. It might be the trades unions. It might be some other key body. But unless they're on side, you could have a lot of trouble simply because they're making the rules of the game. And that explains, of course, why smart companies spend so long trying to lobby, to engage with, to help become a part of that process. So we need to think about cartographers in our network. And the other example I'd give is sometimes we need someone else to help us take our idea forward, even when we've done our best. And a classic example for me, very famous really, you probably know the product Tupperware, that plastic wonderful stuff that you can store food in and so on. And Tupperware, for a chemical engineer like me, is a lovely story. A man called Earl Tupper found a wonderful process just after the Second World War to take oil waste, the sludge that was being pumped out, and people were paying him to take it away. But he found a process to take that waste and convert it into beautiful colored polyethylene plastic containers. And he patented the seal, that Tupperware seal. So he had a product which he thought was world beating. And he thought the world would beat a path to his door, and they didn't. And the success of Tupperware owes not just to him, but also to a woman called Brownie Wise. And she was one of the original door-to-door selling people in the early days of marketing, but she helped pioneer the party. Going into someone's house, in this case, a lot of housewives, showing off the Tupperware in a demonstration, but in a social space. And she constructed the whole idea of social marketing. So some of the housewives then became agents for the product, and it scaled to become a global success. The point was, she's really what I would call a conveyor. She helped take the innovation forward. So sometimes in building our networks, we need to recruit these other players as well to help us get there. So as usual, a long answer, but it's, I think about this building a network, building an ecosystem, which are the skills we need to learn.
Thank you, Professor. My next question before handing over to the participants. We all are a bit worried, and some are very happy, some are very crazy about large language models, generative AI, and on top of that, nowadays, agentic AI. Will this promote innovations, creativity among people? How can this reduce creativity and innovation? What is your opinion, Professor?
Wow, it's another wonderful question. I think we have to recognize there's a spectrum of views. There is, I think, quite a lot of concern, and understandable concern, because this technology has come so fast and has already come so far. It is very capable of being creative. And that's a slightly uncomfortable thing as a human being to say, but without question, demonstrably, it can do certain tasks very creatively. So will that mean that we are no longer needed, or that we are only second best in that? Or are there possibilities? And my personal view is not one just my own. I think there's quite a lot of good research evidence now. There are ways of working with AI. And a lot of the research has been around practical experiments, seeing whether AI can do the innovation job as well as human beings or better. And in particular, there was a very good study in the Journal of Product Innovation Management a couple of years ago, where a colleague of mine from Germany said, let's look at this and put this to the test. And so what they did was to say, okay, let's assume that AI has certain skills which we'd need in innovation. Generating ideas, of course, but also detecting early patterns, identifying opportunities, the kind of creative forecasting kind of thing. So it basically said in the paper, these are the things we expect AI could be good at and maybe could challenge human beings. Then they said, well, let's, rather than speculate, let's put it to the test. So they invented a fictitious company, a company making outdoor equipment for camping and hiking and this kind of thing, and said, okay, what we want to do now is challenge ChatGPT to identify where the market possibilities might be, so finding opportunities, looking at patterns, particularly patterns in social media. What are people talking about that they might need? So this is very early warning signals. And very importantly, idea generation, brainstorming, coming up with product concepts. What came out as the conclusion I felt was very helpful. It basically said, actually, yes, ChatGPT can do all these jobs really well, but it depends on human beings interacting with it, and prompting it, understanding it, treating it more as a partner than as a replacement. And the papers talked optimistically about a kind of hybrid, augmented view. And I loved this so much, and I thought this appeals to my own view, and I wrote a song about it. So if you're desperate for another song, I can even give you a song about it. But that was a couple of years ago. Things have moved on. In particular, there's a very powerful study recently carried out by Harvard University and many others in Procter & Gamble. So we're talking about a real serious innovation player. And they said, let's try and do a controlled experiment. Let's have 4 applications, one where no AI is used at all, one where only AI is used, it's completely automated, and then 2 human conditions. One is humans using AI, a bit like we use Google, as a sort of a search engine, asking it to do certain tasks. And the other was to say, let's recruit AI to the team. as if it were a full team member, and try and find ways to work with it. Without going into the detail, the paper's results suggest that of the 4 options, far and away the most attractive was that partnership, that creative team partnership. So to answer your question, I'd like to believe in that. Everything I've experienced in using AI myself tends to support it. I'm a struggling novelist, amongst other things. And one of the great things I now do when I'm writing in the mornings is I talk to my editor. I say, these are my ideas, this is my sketch, give me some feedback, which is what human editors do. I've worked with them, so I know what I'm expecting. I have to say AI is a really helpful creative partner. So I think we're moving to an era where we have augmented creative partnerships. But as I say, that's a personal view. There are, I think, other perspectives that could be there.
Thank you, Professor. I know how difficult it is to give a very firm answer to that kind of a question as things are still in transition. Audience, we have 50 plus people. Some are award-winning entrepreneurs, some are CXOs, some are university students, undergraduates. It's your turn. Anyone who would like to ask a question from world-renowned author in innovation, Professor John Bessant?
Yeah, good evening, Professor and Dr. Yapa.
Yes.
My question is, the Professor has done many editions in his innovations, right? Starting, I think, in 2018, like up to now, he has edited almost seven the books, right? Journal. Now, my question is, now, if it is it is a production-oriented organization, we can see many points, production points. So innovations we can apply to improve the productivity, product quality, and even cost effectiveness. Now, when come to service organization, any experience you can share, Professor, the service level, the way they improve the service level by introducing the innovation.
Yes, so if I understand the question correctly, this is about innovation, particularly in terms of improving productivity, improving production processes. Is that correct? Do I have the right question?
Yeah, it is for the
In service organizations.
Yeah, I'm referring to service organization. How do we do that?
So doing that I'm sorry, so doing that kind of productivity improvement, but inside service organizations. Well, I come back to my original point. I think the challenge of innovation is for all of us in any shape of organization, whether it's for profit or not for profit. And certainly service businesses are very good targets for innovation simply because there's a mixture of an underlying, if you like, back office process, a set of things which have to be done to deliver the service, but also a relationship that needs to be maintained and built over time with an end user. So I think we have a number of tools to help us in doing that. But without question, I think, given that many economies are now heavily skewed towards services, this is where I think we can make and have made great use of innovation approaches. If we go back, first of all, backwards in time, the idea of lean thinking began in factories. The lean production revolution, if you like, began in observations made of Japanese car factories and then worldwide car factories. It spread to manufacturing and was massively influential in raising productivity right across the manufacturing sector, all sorts of areas. But it didn't stop there. As we began to realize service operations have exactly the same kind of processes in place, the same value streams, the same toolkit can be applied, but it needs to be applied in different ways. And so we had a long period of learning to improve service productivity and improve service operations. As somebody who teaches operations management, it's been interesting to see how much that field has blossomed when we talk about hotels or banks or insurance companies, places which are not factories, but which can benefit enormously from the disciplines and tools of operations management. I think if we carry things forward into the future, customer. And one of the things that I think AI in particular can help us do is deliver a high quality customer experience. At the limit, we kind of highly customized experience to those customers, as well as improving the back office operations. So I think that there's enormous scope for service or service innovation or innovation in service processes. I hope that answers your question, but certainly I think there's a great deal of scope for it.
Yeah, thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Any other questions? We have so many
Yes,
participants. Yeah.
Dr. Shanta, yeah, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, as well as the Professor. I have a question, actually. We had literally optimism back in the days that has created the innovative ideas right now. But we see that quite the dichotomy in this, because we have changed from technological optimism on innovation. So as in your lecture that you mentioned, that innovation is more of a chance, that we are lucky enough, and it's more of a technological optimism. So my question is there an end to innovation as we go along on this path? Because people will rely and people will assume and ascribe everything to innovation, and that as it goes on, people will become literally, I would say, numb. So they will just stop thinking and just stop innovating. Is there that you see in your experience as we are heading towards that? Is there an end to innovation? Would we stop innovating?
That's a lovely question, very philosophical, but my short answer is no, I don't think there is, because I think it's in the nature of innovation that it's constantly on the lookout for some new opportunity, some new way of framing, some new way. Perhaps I could say at this point, it's not just about technology. There's a danger sometimes that we equate innovation with technological change, and whilst the tools are enormously powerful, whether they're microchips or large language models or whatever, but that's not where innovation, that's not only that's not the only domain of innovation. Back to the previous question, many, many innovations that have really changed the world have essentially been service innovations, which have very little equipment involved. They're different ways of approaching how we deliver a service, how we help solve a problem.
I guess you enjoyed the session, which we conducted for almost 50 minutes with Professor John Bessant. He apologized for his inability to join now. He's not in UK, he's in Cyprus. Friends, there's going to be another equally interesting session tomorrow at the same time, 7 p.m. Anyone interested, we can share the link. And I have already shared a Google form for you to register. And you may join. He is Professor Prabhu, Jaideep Prabhu from University of Cambridge, who coined the term frugal innovation. He is going to talk about frugal innovation, how technologies can be integrated with frugal innovation. It's nothing but doing better with less resources. Resource constraints are not considered as challenges. We try to innovate around resource constraints. That's the basic concept in frugal innovation. Professor Jaideep Prabhu is the one who coined the term frugal innovation. I invite you all to join us tomorrow at 7 p.m. I'll share the link with all the participants who appear here. I apologize for not being able to continue the rest of the 10 minutes of the program due to a technical issue. Thank you.